Deep in a valley surrounded by towering mountains and cut off from the rest of the world lived a community of farmers who had relied on a single ancient river for generations to water their crops and sustain their livestock. However, one year a massive drought struck the land and the river began to shrink until it was nothing more than a thin trail of mud and parched earth. The people were terrified as they watched their emerald fields turn to yellow dust and their animals grow weak from thirst. For weeks they prayed for rain, but the sky remained a heartless blue and the heat grew more intense with every passing day. Among the villagers was a quiet young man named Silas, who spent his days watching the birds, and noticed that while the valley was dry, the high peaks of the mountains were still capped with thick layers of ancient ice that never seemed to melt. He realized that the necessity of their survival demanded a solution that no one had ever dared to try because the climb was dangerous and the path was blocked by jagged rocks and deep ravines. But as the food supplies dwindled and the cries of the hungry children filled the air, Silas knew that desperation was the only fuel he needed to ignite a spark of invention. He gathered the remaining strong men and women and told them that they could no longer wait for nature to be kind, and that they must force the mountains to give up their frozen treasure. He began to design a system of hollowed-out cedar logs and stone channels that could stretch from the high glaciers all the way down to the valley floor, a task that everyone said was impossible. Silas did not listen to the doubters, because the hunger in his stomach and the fear in his heart told him that he had no other choice but to succeed. They labored under the scorching sun, carving paths into the solid rock and joining thousands of logs together using nothing but primitive tools and the raw strength of their will. Every time a section collapsed or a leak formed, they did not give up, because the necessity of the situation pushed them to find a better way to seal the joints and reinforce the structures until they had invented a new type of hydraulic pressure system that utilized the natural tilt of the mountain. As the final log was placed and the ice began to melt under the summer sun, a miracle occurred as a clear, cold stream of water began to rush down the man-made veins of the mountain and into the parched valley below. The people cheered as the earth drank its fill, and within weeks the fields were green again. The harvest was more bountiful than it had ever been in the history of the village. They realized that they had created something far more advanced than a simple irrigation ditch. They had invented a new way to live in harmony with the harsh environment, because the struggle had forced them to think beyond their limits. Silas stood at the edge of the water and looked up at the peaks, knowing that if they had stayed comfortable, they would have never discovered the genius hidden within their own minds. And so the story of the mountain water became a testament to the truth that when survival is at stake, the human spirit will always find a way to turn a desert into a garden. The news of the valley's incredible achievements spread like wildfire across the neighboring lands, attracting scholars and engineers who could not believe that a simple group of farmers had solved a problem that had baffled the greatest minds of the cities for centuries. Silas became a mentor to many, but he always reminded them that he was no genius, and that his only secret was the desperate need to keep his people alive. Because when you have no other option but to succeed, your brain unlocks doors that are usually shut by the laziness of comfort. As the village transformed into a prosperous town, they began to use their newfound engineering skills to build windmills that could grind grain with the mountain breeze, and thermal pits that kept their homes warm during the harsh winters, all of which were born from the same root of survival and struggle. The people no longer feared the changing seasons because they had learned that every challenge was simply a hidden invitation to invent something even better than before. Silas grew old, watching his grandchildren play by the same crystal-clear water that he had brought down from the heavens, and he would often tell them that the greatest gift the drought ever gave them was not the water itself, but the realization that they were capable of doing the impossible when they were pushed to the edge. As the sun set over the thriving green valley, the flowing waters seemed to sing a song of triumph, reminding every soul who heard it that hardship is not a wall but a bridge to a higher state of being, because the human mind is the most powerful tool ever created, and it only shines its brightest when the darkness of necessity is closing in. The legacy of Silas and his village did not stay confined to the mountains, because word of their invention reached the great emperor, who was struggling to provide for his people in the arid plains far to the south. The emperor sent his finest architects to study the wooden veins of the valley, and Silas told them that the secret was not in the wood or the stone, but in the pressure of the moment that forced them to see a solution where others only saw a problem. As the years passed, the simple log channels were replaced with grand marble aqueducts, and the technology of the valley became the foundation for entire civilizations, proving that a single act of desperate creativity can change the course of human history for thousands of years. The village became a sanctuary for inventors and dreamers, who believed that no obstacle was too great if the heart was willing to fight for its existence. And even when the valley faced new challenges like great floods or shifting earth, the people did not panic, because they knew that within every disaster lies the seed of a new discovery that just needs the water of necessity to grow. Silas passed away in his sleep with the sound of the rushing water in his ears. But his spirit lived on in every wheel that turned, in every field that bloomed, in places where life was once thought impossible. The world learned that human progress is not a slow climb up a ladder of ease, but a series of giant leaps, taken by those who have their backs against the wall and the fire of survival in their eyes. So whenever you find yourself in a situation where old doors seem closed and the path ahead is dark, remember the man who brought water from the ice. And know that your greatest breakthrough is waiting just on the other side of your greatest need. Because the mind is like a flint that only creates a spark when it is struck by the hard rock of necessity. And that spark is enough to light up the entire world forever. The influence of the valley grew so vast that it inspired a new era of human thought, where people stopped viewing problems as curses and began to see them as the raw materials for their next great victory. Because they realized that without the drought, they would have remained a simple village forever and would never have discovered the hidden power that lay dormant in their own hands. The aqueducts they built became the veins of the earth, carrying life to the furthest reaches of the desert and turning barren sands into lush orchards where children could play in the shade of trees that were never meant to grow there. As the generations passed, the story of Silas was no longer just a tale of water, but a philosophy of life taught to every student. That the comfort of today is the prison of tomorrow, while the necessity of the moment is the key to the future. The great libraries of the world recorded the events of the mountain valley as the moment when humanity finally understood that struggle is the father of strength and desperation is the mother of genius. And so the small stream that once fought its way through cedar logs became a mighty river of knowledge that flowed through time, reminding every person who faces a dead end that there is always a way through if you are brave enough to let your needs sharpen your mind like a blade. Until the day comes when there are no more mountains too high to climb and no more deserts too wide to cross, because the human spirit, fueled by necessity, is an unstoppable force that turns every shadow of a crisis into the light of a new beginning, proving that the greatest inventions are the ones we create to save each other and ourselves from the impossible. The final chapter of the valley was not written in books, but in the very lives of those who refused to surrender to the drought. As the village became a symbol of hope for all of humanity, Silas's original cedar logs were eventually replaced by pillars of stone and gold. But the people never forgot the humble origins of their success. They understood that their prosperity was not a result of luck, but the result of being pushed to the very edge of existence, where they had to choose between extinction and evolution. As the old man finally laid down to rest, his last breath was a sigh of satisfaction, because he knew that he had left behind a world that no longer feared the dark or the dry seasons, because they had found the light of innovation within themselves. The valley flourished for 1,000 years, serving as a reminder to every traveler that the greatest tragedies often carry the seeds of the greatest triumphs, and that the human mind is a garden that only truly blooms when the cold winds of necessity begin to blow. And so the story of the mountain water reaches its final rest, leaving us with the eternal truth that we are never truly stuck, as long as we have a need to survive and the courage to build a bridge, where there was once only a gap, proving once and for all that necessity is the mother of invention and the guardian of our future. Your time is coming. Keep believing, keep fighting. Don't just watch. Go out and prove them wrong. Thank you for being part of the journey. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.